What's up, guys? Ian here, coach of your Ladner Lanturn, bringing you guys our Season 8 NCL Season 8 draft analysis video. Draft recap, draft analysis, whatever you want to call it, really. Trying a little bit of a different take on this one. Going with a little bit higher quality production, I guess, is kind of my goal here. So I've got the I made these as Photoshop slides, and then I uploaded them into OBS, so it should be a little bit easier and a little better quality than Google Slides ever was. And I've decided to just edit the music in the background instead of playing it, so that you guys don't hear the same songs every single video. So, starting things off here, a little bit of a different style of draft. So, this is fine. I've been talking about running usage-based tiers for forever, and we wanted to move to split tiers as well. So we're now on to split usage-based tiers. What this means is that Tier 1 is now divided into 200, 180, and 160 points. Tier 1 plus, Tier 1, and Tier 1 minus, and every tier also has a plus, regular, and minus tier, except for Megas, where there's only Mega Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 4. Same standard stuff applies, where you have to draft Tier 1, Tier 2, 2 Tier 3s, Tier 4, Tier 5, and a Mega, and then the other 4 are just free. You can pick them from wherever. The difference being is that because you're paying different prices for things, so you could take a Tier 1 Plus as your required Tier 1, but that's 200 points, so that's pulling directly from your free points later, essentially directly pulling 20 points from your free points later, so you'd only have 380 to work with unless you grab, a Mega that would give you points, like a Mega Adino or something. The Megas were split, so now Mega Tier 1 you actually have to pay for. It takes away 40 of your free points. Mega Tier 2 is free. Mega Tier 3 gave you 40 points, and Mega Tier 4 gave you 60 points, which is like the really bad ones, like Audino and stuff like that. So conceivably, you could build a reasonably top-heavy draft, but you're not going to get very far with the free picks. So it ends up with being a much more balanced way to draft, I found. Although I'm very happy with how this team came out. I'll spoil it right now. I did not get sniped a single time. I think this might have been the only draft ever that I've never been sniped in. Very happy with it. And we covered every single type in 10 Pokemon. I actually had a slot to burn. I just kind of had to decide what I wanted to do with it. I felt like I had everything covered. I'm pretty happy with this draft. I hope that it translates into my building and playing, but I think that for once the draft is like, for once in Gen 8 and NCL, my draft is not what's holding me back. The last 2 seasons have been absolutely brutal, going 6-6 in both of them, and my drafts have been pretty terrible. I've had to use some like significant free agent transactions to get those out of the way. So, actually, let me just pull up the doc here. I was not prepared. I should have come prepared, but I did not. You guys won't be able to see this, of course, but bring up the draft tab for myself to see what's going on. So, I did roll a pretty bad pick. I ended up with 10th, 11th, something. I think 11th. No, it must have been 10th. I think I ended up with 10th. And I did something, so as you guys know, we can trade draft picks in NCL, so I think that's kind of a cool thing, trading for free agents and stuff. I did a weird thing where I traded with Stu for second, kind of. So I traded him a free agent for his second round picks, his first and second round picks, essentially. So he picked on my behalf in the first and second rounds. So I essentially got second overall pick in the first round, and then whatever it was, 15th in the second round, which is, what is that, 31st. So I got second and 31st, and I traded him 10th and, I don't know what it is, 20th? 10th, coming back 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, something like that. I don't know the exact math on it, but I picked for him, and he picked for me in the first 2 rounds. So he picked for me Dragapult in the first round. Now, this is a mon I've been wanting to try for a while, and it just so happens that in another league I got first overall pick. The draft before this one, I got first overall pick, and I took Dragapult. There was a mon I had in mind. We allowed some funky stuff this season. So, actually, we did allow Protean Greninja got passed, so that's allowed this season. We allowed Nasty Plot on Deoxys Speed, so those both went into 200 points. along with kind of your staples like Dragapult as well. Kyurem Black, Landorus Incarnate, Mew, Tapu Lele, Urshifu Single Strike, Ash Greninja, Celesteela, Libero, Cinderace, Clefable, Darkrai from last season. And then the other fun unbans, we've got Mega Alakazam, both of the Megalodias up in Mega Tier 1. And we allowed the same complex on Genesect that we had in Season 5 here, which is no shift gear, and it's forced to hold a drive. So that went down to 160. It's still a very powerful Pokemon, but the fact that it's essentially forced into an item, I think makes it fine. Yeah, so anyways, it's 160. It did get picked up. I didn't have any interest in it. What I did have an interest in was Magearna, which we allowed in at 180. Probably should have been 200, even with these complexes. I'm not gonna lie. After seeing it, I've seen it in week 1 already. Spoiler: I don't play it in week 1, but they've played their game, so I've seen what it can do, and it's not as limited as I thought. It was triple complex, which is the first time we've ever done a triple complex here. Stored Power, Draining Kiss, and Shift Gear were all banned on it, so it can't use any of those 3 moves, which I think limits it a little bit. You know, you're looking more at like choice sets, AV sets. You're looking at Combine, like slower Trick Room sets generally. Less of the faster. Actually, both Magearna users have played already. So one was Scarfed and one was AV. So that's kind of where I see Magearna being at. I think the power level and the coverage that it gets is still ridiculous, but and the typing, of course, the typing is just stupid. Yeah, so I really wanted Magearna, but it was Mike, and he had 3rd pick. And had I just traded fully up to 2nd with Stu and not only traded up temporarily for the 1st pick, I wouldn't have felt as bad. I was initially planning on taking Magearna, but I felt really bad after Mike expressed that he really wanted it. Because Protean Greninja went 1st, and that was going to be his pick, but then he took Magearna instead, and that was his 2nd one. So in the end, I just went for Dragapult 2nd, and that's sort of a really long-winded story about how I feel really bad, but I still ended up with Dragapult. So Dragapult is really diverse. You know, Ghost Dragon type, really fast, so it fills out the top end of my speed tiers right away. It's a nice mixed attacker. You don't really know what's coming, and it's a U-turner, so it's got some good momentum. To start off the draft, it's a pretty easy mon to build around, to be honest. I think you can kind of just like slap anything around on the team, but I did think a little bit about where I wanted to go with this, so I thought to myself, you know, what really switches into Dragapult? And actually, like, bulky, specially defensive fairies do a pretty decent job of switching in Dragapult. Most of the time, you're going to want to run, like, DD sets, but then your best move to hit them is going to be Steel Wing, which isn't very reliable, or Phantom Force, which means that you're open to a Moonblast the turn after you've hit them with Phantom Force. Or they can just... you know what? I don't think Phantom Force goes through Protect. I think that's only Shadow Force. So I think they can just protect, like something like an Aromatisse, right, or a Florges could just like protect on the turn that you're actually clicking Phantom Force, or you're attacking them with Phantom Force, and then they just Moonblast, or they Moonblast on the turn that you're Phantom Forcing. They get to wish the turn before, and then they Moonblast on the turn that you hit them or whatever, and then you're dead and they're at full HP again. So I wanted something to be able to beat those specially defensive fairies really easily, and also something that could pivot. And it actually just ends up beating the dark types as well. If you're curious, with my actual pick, I took Tornadus T, and then traded that mid-draft to Stu. That's how that one worked. So anyways, with my 2nd pick, I went a little bit, you know, off the wild side. This probably isn't really a 2nd round pick, but I was pretty pleased with this getting to me. I think it pairs really well with Dragapult. And actually, I'd thought about this a lot, and we're going to get a lot of the same stuff that I had thought about initially. I had originally planned out a Dragapult draft, and then my computer died, and it was on a sticky note. So that's gone, because that hard drive is just completely fried. I don't remember what was on that besides like a regen core, Dragapult, the Mega that I chose on this team, the ground type that I chose on this team, and this Pokemon being Scizor. So Scissor's a 160 point Mon. It's generally not the best tier 1 in the world, right? I think it's kind of going to go between about 160 and 140 in my mind, because it's probably a little bit of a higher tier 2 or a lower tier 1. But I like regular Scizor, so I could have taken Mega Scizor, right? Mega Scizor was actually still on the board when I grabbed this, but what I wanted, it wasn't actually, it was gone. but irrelevant because I didn't want Mega Scissor anyways. I hate Mega Scissor. I very much prefer regular Scissor, and I've posted actually a bit of content with regular Scissor on here. My WWC Championship run, regular Scissor was on that team. I really enjoyed it in that league, and UPAD league when I had my Rain team, Scissor was on that too. And I liked it on both squads. I'm a big fan of regular Scissor. I really like having an item on Scissor. It just makes it much stronger. Like Mega Scissor has the base stats to back it up and a little bit more bulk, but I like the fact that I can run an Aqua Berry, these specially defensive fairies. You know, I've mentioned Aromatisse and Florges, but something more along the lines of Sylveon. You know, those things get Mystical Fire now, and they're bulky enough to tank a Bullet Punch. You'd probably have to like Iron Head them in the face or something for them to actually die. But I also liked the pairing of U-turn between these Pokemon. You know, they can just kind of like U-turn in on each other's checks, if that makes sense. Now, granted, Scissor is gonna, you know, Steel types are gonna come in on Scissor mostly, and Dragapult's not the best Steel killer in the world. It's not really designed to kill Steels. But Fires, you know, Dragapult can switch into Fires pretty easily, which is another thing with switching to Scissor. So, I liked all of those ideas. I think they pair decently well together. They probably aren't the perfect pairing, but I liked the pivot option between them. And Scissor picks up some defog. I've got like a weird gap now between Dragapult and Scissor, which is gigantic, but that'll get filled in. You know, we're only 2 picks in. I am 360 points down though already with Dragapult and Scissor, so I only have 740 left. I still have a bunch of required picks. Now, luckily, this is one of my free picks, so you know the points that I'm digging into aren't really as important because I only need 3 more free picks anyways, right? But it does mean that I'm going to have to go a little bit budget on some of the other mons. Like, you can't just take, like, you don't just get a free tier 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus. If you wanted to go with that, then your free points get completely diminished, right? It's not free to go for the pluses. So depending on how many free points left, I can move into a different area. Granted, tier 2 minus is like really bad, and tier 2's value actually got really horrible because of this change. Tier 2 plus is 140, tier 2 is 130, and tier 2 minus is 120. And honestly, most of the good tier 2s are in 140 and 130. Anything that you thought that was a good pickup in tier 2 last gen or in the previous iteration of regular tiers is generally in 130. 140 is like the tier 1s that no one thinks is tier 1 value, or some people think are tier 1 value, but honestly they're tier 2 value. You know, that's the tier 2 pluses, things like Blacephalon, both of the Thunderous forms. What else is in there? Buzzwole, Deoxys Defense, Ferrothorn, like things that could have been tier 1 in previous generations. Especially like gens, like there's a lot of Gen 6 tier 1 Pokemon in here, like Salamence and Rotom-Wash, Ferrothorn, Gengar, like those things were all tier 1 back in Gen 6, Reuniclus as well. And Gen 7, early Gen 7, a lot of those things were tier 1 too. Now, I'm actually miffed on what I pick next. Oh, I take a tier 2 plus. So we're going to add to our pivoting a little bit of a bulkier Pokemon, something that can definitely switch into the Fires and the Steels that Scissor doesn't like. In fact, at 4 times resist Steel, it is a Rotom-Wash. I'm actually kind of surprised this made it to me, but very pleased that it did make it to me in round 3. I think Rotom-Wash is phenomenal this gen. I've used it really well this gen already. Nasty Plot sets are very powerful. I mean, I like Rotom Frost a lot this gen as well, and to be honest, Rotom Wash and Rotom Frost were my favorite Rotom forms before getting Nasty Plot this gen. Before getting Nasty Plot this gen anyways, but I like both of them just because of the outright power that a Nasty Plot set can do. Rotom Wash has a lot more defensive utility, and especially on the scene, a lot more defensive utility than Rotom Frost ever does. Especially because of the fact that you don't have to run Boots like outright every single game, and you can actually run Leftovers and Helmet and Berries and all that kind of funky stuff. Life Orbs, Scarf, Specs. I mean, Rotom's just got a lot of things going for it. As long as I can break grounds, which I can't really at this time, then Electric Spam is really good. You know, Rotom is going to break grounds for itself, but if I wanted to run a choice set, then I need to be able to break grounds with picks later on into the draft, which I think I am able to do. I did grab a Mon that is like pretty much specifically designed to kill ground types, but we'll get to that later on. So yeah, Rotom adds some more pivoting. It fills in a little bit of that gap between Scissor and Dragapult. At this point, I'm pretty much set on my Mega. I'm going to go one more pick, and then we'll talk about my Mega a little bit. I probably could have just posted my Mega there, but I do take my Mega in round 11 because there was no threat of it getting sniped after this next round. A lot of people were taking their Megas. There were only so many people taking Megas, and a lot of those people had already taken the typings of my Mega, and I was like, I don't really think they're going to go for this. I could probably wait if I do some scouting. So I scouted all of the Megas that people were taking. Everyone wanted something different. It was like, honestly, like, wow, everyone can just take whatever the heck they want. But my next pick is my ground type. It's my first rocker on the team. You know, I kind of, with the high tiers, I want to get something that's going to be able to set rocks. It's a tier 3 plus, so I'm actually down to 600 points, I think, or 500 points, I think, actually. I'm down to 500 points left for the rest of my draft. Now, my Mega doesn't cost any points, but it also doesn't give me any points, so 500 points for 6 Pokemon is kind of cutting it a little bit short. Just saying, cutting a little bit short, and I really did go very reasonably top-heavy with where I wanted to go with my picks. So, anyways, I took Nidoqueen next in round 4. I value this really, really highly. I think a Nido on this team is absolutely perfect. Here's the Steel Killer that I was looking for Scissor, and actually my next pick is going to be another Steel Killer, so Steels won't be a problem at all for this team. And even the Steel Flyings, I've got Rotom-Wash, and I actually end up picking up another Electric later on, so I don't think that any of those will be a problem either. Nidoqueen gives me some reliable hazards here. I like T-Spikes a lot with Dragapult. I think just one layer of T-Spikes with Dragapult and as well as Scissor is just enough chip to be able to clean things up quite effectively later. On top of that, I think Rocks are very important for both. You know, I've got double Defog now. So it's unfortunately, I'm not going to get spin on this draft, which is really whatever. Most of the time, I'm probably going to be pressuring people a lot more to defog and stuff like that, and Nidoqueen pressures a lot of rockers really effectively by itself just based on the coverage that it has. It's bulky enough to tank hits, and it's especially offensive enough to be able to, well, it's offensive enough to be able to dish out damage still. I think it's a nice hybrid pick between pretty much everything you'd want. It's kind of a jack of all trades, and it's not a jack of all trades in the sense that it's a jack of all trades, master of none, because it actually does a lot of the stuff you'd want it to do much more effectively than counterparts just because of sheer force. And the fact that it can run Recovery Item really easily in Black Sludge. It's got very easy defensive berry choices. In a lot of matchups, it's got really easy defensive berry choices in order to revenge kill things. I really like Nidoqueen. But my next pick is the other Steel Killer that I was talking about for mons that aren't grounded in particular, but definitely the steel flyings won't be able to handle this one at all. But also, if I'm worried about Shukaberries on things, then I have the opportunity to force them into Choppleberry or Occaberries with Infernape. It's also another pivot, so I'm kind of working. You can kind of look at my speed tiers, right? I've got 142, 108, 86, 76, and 65 right now. So I think sort of the bottom area, like 86, 76, and 65 is good. And then Infernape to Dragapult, I'm going to sort of build my way up from Infernape to Dragapult. And then I want one thing in the middle between Infernape and Rotom-Wash, and that's probably perfect. So yeah, I like Infernape a lot. It's another rocker, which I thought was good. It was a high tier rocker, and nothing really does what this does. I was considering Emboar. I was like, oh, you know, I could take Emboar. It's kind of a budget thing, and then I've got a lot of you know, room to work around with fairies and whatnot. But I wanted my Mega to be a fairy, so. Anyways, I ended up with Infernape. You know, I spent a little bit more points than I wanted to. Scissor and Infernape both tier 1 minus. So I spent 320 points just between the two of them, but I liked what Infernape did for this team a lot. And being another pivot, it's another mix attacker to go with Dragapult. The rocking option, it does have some niche defensive sets with like Rocky Helmet Slack Off. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't really have the best ways to kill waters right now. You know, Rotom-Wash is probably my best way to kill water right now, which is kind of bleh, but you know, Infernape is the Steel Killer that I wanted. So I don't think to go with Nidoqueen. So I don't think that Scissor is walled really at all anymore, with Rotom and Nidoqueen to be able to deal with fires, and Nidoqueen and Infernape to be able to do steals. I don't think that Scissor is in a bad spot. Excuse me. And I've picked up a lot of typings. Everything so far has been dual typing. So I've got 10 of the 18 types, just my first 15, my first 5 Pokemon. Okay, so the next one that I wanted another rocker. I wanted some defog, and I wanted to fill that speed gap between Dragapult and Infernape. This is a Mon that got a few new tools this gen, which I really, really liked. It's Aerodactyl, so Dual Wing Beat's a little bit more reliable than Aerial Ace and Wing Attack, which is good. I mean, reliable in terms of actual damage output, not the fact that it misses. It fills 2 typings that I didn't have, so it's another ground immunity, I should say, but a real ground immunity. Rotom-Wash is still weak to Mold Breaker ground types, which is something that I was also looking at. Like before, I didn't mention it, but Infernape, Nidoqueen, Rotom sometimes. Scissor is a steel. It's not a steel that is weak to ground, luckily, but I was kind of worried about Earthquake spam. So Aerodactyl is a nice Earthquake switch in. Got Dragon Dance as well, so it's a much more potent offensive threat. It's a really, really reliable rocker. If you don't want to run Rock's Nidoqueen, then Rock's Aerodactyl is perfectly fine. I do wish that it got pivoting, but that probably makes it a little bit too broken with like U-turn or something on the Aerodactyl. I'm okay with it. I think it's going to be a pretty solid addition to the team. It's not going to come every single week. It is a tier 3 minus, so I only did pay 80 points for it. I hope to God it was a tier 3 minus. Yes, tier 3 minus. So I only paid 80 points for it, so I'm saving a little bit of my budget there. I kind of had to, considering Nidoqueen's tier 3 plus, it's 100. So I had to sort of like split the difference there so that my tier 3 sort of evened out, and then I still had free points to work with at the end of the draft. I don't really, if I'm being honest, I think I barely have any points left because I'm still required to take a tier 4 and a tier 5, which in a best case scenario, tier 4 minus is 50 points and tier 5 minus is 20. So like best case scenario, I'm spending 70 points there, which does not leave me with very many left for my last free picks. Where was I going with this? I don't remember. Let's just move on to the next pick. Right, Alolan Persian. Okay, so this kind of fills the gap there, right? So I go from Dragapult, Aerodactyl, Alolan Persian, Infernape. I think that's pretty much perfect in terms of what I would want there. And now I really only need something between Rotom and Infernape, and then I'm good. And that's going to be my Mega. So we'll get to that at the end. Just assume that speed tier is filled. I've got all my speed tiers covered because of a specific interaction between Rotom-Wash's speed and my Mega speed. So we'll talk about that at the end. Alolan Persian offers even more pivoting. It's another U-turner. It's a parting shotter, which I really like because there's actually quite a bit of setup on this team already. Dragon Dance Dragapult, Dragon Dance Aerodactyl, Home Claws Aerodactyl, Nasty Pot Rotom-Wash, SD Scissor, SD Infernape, Nasty Pot Infernape. Like there's a bunch of setup options here. So I really like Persian's stuff there. I like the physically defensive utility that it offers me as well, because Rotom can be specially defensive or physically defensive. It can be whatever the heck it wants. Same with Nidoqueen, really whatever the heck it wants. But I liked Alolan Persian's specific physically defensive utility. I like it as a ghost resist for Dragapult, which I didn't have previously. So it's another way to be able to do that. It's another dark resist to go with Infernape. Infernape doesn't have Z moves to tank dark tag, to tank knockoff or anything like that this gen. Unfortunately, Persian doesn't either. But I'm taking like 1% from a knockoff that isn't from an actual dark type with Furco plus the typing. So I liked Persian a lot in that to fill that role. That's pretty much all I was going for. At this point, my draft, because my Mega is locked up, I'm pretty much just trying to like fill typings, fill roles with my tier 5s. I want to get a little bit more. I think I wanted to get a little bit more hazards. I think I'm good on removal. I've got the Rotom-Wash, Aerodactyl, and Scissor for removal. That's pretty good. Rotom-Wash is going to be running defog in most of the games, if I'm being completely honest. So it's definitely not like the worst thing in the world. I wanted to grab some more hazards. I wanted to get some more value out of my draft. So the next thing that I grabbed is some more value out of tier 5, what in my opinion is probably one of the best tier 5s in the game. I know I said that about Golurk the last season or the last 2 seasons or whatever, but this one really hits the nail on the head for me, and it is Kecleon. So it's another rocker. It's a normal type, so it's a ghost immunity. It's an effective ghost killer with the combination of Sucker Punch, Knockoff, and Shadow Sneak in the set. It gets a wild amount of coverage. It's technically a Trick Room setter. If I did want to go with any sort of Trick Room mode, there's no like weird Trick Room aspect to the team. My last 2 free picks aren't really like Trick Room Pokemon. but it is the slowest Pokemon on my team, so it's got that going for it as well. It's a very specially defensive Pokemon, which complements Alolan Persian's high physical defense with the combination of Fur Coat. So I like that as well. There's just a lot of value that I see in Kecleon. I've drafted it quite a few times. It's been very effective for me. I believe I won a UTL championship with it. I could be wrong. I thought that was that season, though. It's tier 5. I mean, let's be honest. It's tier 5 plus. I really had no points left over at this point. I'm down to 60 free points left for my last 2 free Pokemon. There's only so much you can do with that. You can either go a tier 5 and a tier 5, or a tier 5 plus and a tier 5 minus. You have no other options. There's no 10-point options. You can't take into tier 4. So I'm just kind of looking to fill the last typings that I needed. And at this point, the last 2 typings I needed were grass and ice. So I just picked up on Abomasnow. I'm like, whatever. I need a grass and an ice type. I'll just take a grass ice type. So here's the ground killer that I was talking about before. You know, my team's probably still a little bit weak to grounds. I don't think that I'm weak so much to Earthquake, just because I think it's sort of balanced out around the team. Abomasnow does offer me that resist, though, and it does get Aurora Veil this gen, so it can be quite a useful utility Pokemon with, like, Sub-Seed Aurora Veil sets, things like that. Just really annoying. I think I do have the Fire Resist to back it up. I've got Infernape for Fire Resist, Rotom-Wash, Dragapult, excuse me. Alolan Persian will tank fire hits for sure. You know, usually you're only worried about like Infernape as Alolan Persian, and I have Infernape, so no big deal. It is a little bit sus that I do have 2 4x weaknesses to fire, but that's just kind of how it goes in taking this as one Pokemon instead of a grass and an ice type. I don't think that there's a better grass type in tier 5. There's probably a better ice type, like I could have gone for like Glaceon or something. But I didn't really see a better grass outside of like Meganium, and I really value Abomasnow's ability to kill grounds a lot more than Meganium, just purely from like Blizzard with Snow Warning or like just Giga Drain. You know, Abomasnow, it's got a lot of offensive stuff going for it. I used it in AABL. I think I uploaded that season, and it was pretty okay for me that season. You know, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. So we'll see where it goes. You know, it's probably not going to come to a ton of games. It's a nice ground resist though, and a nice ground killer if I need it to be. And then my last real pick that isn't a Mega, I just went with Luxray. So it's a mon I've wanted to try for a while. Abomasnow, Scizor, and then Luxray in terms of speed tier 60, 65, 70. So it fits in there. It's an Intimidator if I need it to be. It's a Status Absorber if I need it to be with Guts. It's a pretty decent physical attacker, actually, in all honesty. It's an okay Scarfer. It's a Volt Switcher, which I value a little bit more. You know, it's getting some more momentum, which I've sort of been lacking up since the Alolan Persian pick. You know, Kecleon and Abomasnow didn't give me any momentum, so Luxray gives me some more extra momentum. It's a Status Absorber, like I said. It's a really good physical attacker. You know, you just run like Flame or Guts and use Click Facade a lot of the time, or Thunder Fang, or Wild Charge, or Crunch. Gets Play Rough this generation, gets Psychic Fangs this generation, so I think it's a little bit better. Psychic Fangs helps it out against the Nidos. Obviously, I have one of the Nidos, so who gives a shit. It does have Ice Fang, I believe, in its moveset too, so it's kind of got like the perfect coverage thing that you would want going on. I just think it's a cool Pokemon. I just think it's cool. Insert Marge GIF. I just think it's neat. I'm not going to edit that in, by the way. I have absolutely no interest of editing videos besides just adding music to them. But yeah, I looked at my draft and I was like, you know, what do I really struggle with? What type do I really, really struggle with? And I didn't think it was as much grounds. Now that I have Abomasnow, you know, there's a lot of coverage on the rest of my team. Dragapult can run water coverage pretty easily. Rotom-Wash is still really good at killing grounds. Nidoqueen even has access to Ice Beam right off the gate. Kecleon with Ice Punch, you know, I think Scizor can kind of deal with grounds for the most part. Infernape gets grass on coverage, so there's not a ton of reasons for me to want to kill more grounds. Although this does make my team a little bit weaker to ground, you know, teams aren't really going to expect Luxray in most games, so prepping for Luxray is sort of like not on the radar of most people. But waters, I noticed that waters were something that my team probably would still struggle with at this point. You know, Abomasnow isn't the best water killer despite being a grass, so I'm kind of relying on Rotom-Wash a little bit more, and I thought that Luxray sort of fit into the I want to kill waters a little bit better. So I think it helps me in matchups against things like Melodic a little bit more, especially as a Status Absorber, because then Melodic can't just like burn me with Scald or Toxic me with Toxic, you know, and then I'm in a weird position.
So I like the Luxray for that, and that's pretty much all it does for the team. You know, it's just kind of a complementary piece that didn't need to be there, but you know, it could have been absolutely anything at 30 points. 30 points pretty limited if I had to, like, it's pretty limited. I had already taken one of the 30-point mons. A bunch of the other 30-point mons were gone. You know, my options for an electric, if I really want an electric, are like Luxray, Electabuzz, Alolan Golem perhaps, but not a ton of great Pokemon like regular Manectric, but I like Luxray a lot better than regular Manectric. I think it fills out sort of where I wanted my team to go. I think my team ended up a little bit more in terms of mixed damage. I'm very widespread in terms of the damage. Like, I don't think you can just slap a physical wall on and then my team's like walled, or slap a special wall on and my team's walled. There's, you know, Dragapult's a mixed attacker. Nidoqueen is actually a pretty effective mixed attacker. Infernape is a really good mixed attacker, and Abomasnow is a really good mixed attacker, so I've got like a good line down there. But just to finish the draft off, we're going to grab a Supreme Special Breaker. I think Scissor is an amazing physical breaker, and I think this Pokemon is an amazing special breaker. We had it on the team last season. It is Mega Gardevoir, so I think Mega Gardevoir pairs really phenomenally with Dragapult. You know, it's going to be able to deal with all those dark types that Dragapult doesn't want to take on. It's not going to be able to switch into the dark types necessarily because it's neutral to them, and Mega Gardevoir and Dragapult don't really handle ghosts very well, but that's kind of where Alolan, Persian, and Kecleon come into the mix. I love the Fairy Dragon Steel Core of Dragapult, Kecleon, or sorry, my god, Dragapult, Scissor, and Mega Gardevoir. I think it's just phenomenal for breaking. I honestly don't know if there's a better breaking core unless you threw in like Kyurem Black, but in terms of this one, you've got the speed output of Dragapult and you've got the pivoting of all three. Honestly, Mega Gardevoir gets teleport now, so you know, you can pivot into each other. Mega Gardevoir's got some pretty useful tech in terms of like Heal Bell and Wish and things like that, so I do have a clerical option on the team now, and just an absolute menace of a breaker. You know, I wasn't super thrilled with it last season through the first 8 games or 9 games or whatever, and then just the back half of my season, it just had matchup after matchup after matchup. It got 11 kills in 2 games between my last 2 games. Yeah, I really like Mega Gardevoir, and I liked it so much on this team. Yeah, it's the Psychic and Fairy that my team was missing. You know, I noted, you guys probably realized, and were screaming at the monitor. You know, when I got to Luxray, I'm like, oh, I've got all the types now. And you're like, well, you don't have a Psychic or a Fairy. Well, there you go. I already had Mega Gardevoir planned. No one was going to take it, and so I was just able to take it in round 11. So that is the full draft. I am very happy with this team. Let me know what you guys think of it in the comments. I love this team so much, but we'll see if I'm able to translate that. The skill level definitely went up. You know, we promoted the top 3 Blitzel players, and they were all really good players. So looking forward to a bit of a fun season this time around. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you guys for week 1, where we take on Zippy and the Kent State Golden Flash Cannons.